First, let's start by doing a little puzzle practice. There are 4 puzzles for you to solve at the top of the page. Push pause, solve your 4 puzzles, and then when you're ready to check your work, push play. Take a minute and check your answers against mine, and then let's get started on practicing some factoring by splitting the middle term. Push pause if you need a moment before you move on. All right, let's take a look at this problem. 2x squared minus 5x plus 3. So first I need to solve my puzzle. What multiplies to make 6 and what adds to make negative 5? Well, let's see. I feel like we just solved this puzzle. Didn't we do that up here? We did. The very first one, what multiplies to make 6 and adds to make negative 5? Looks like negative 2 and negative 3. All right, so we already did the work up above. So we're going to split the middle term of negative 5x into a negative 2x and a negative 3x. So that turns our problem into 2x squared minus 2x minus 3x plus 3. Then we're going to go ahead and create those 2 binomials. Whoops. And make sure that we throw that plus sign in there because we're really adding them together. So off on the side, I want to think about 2x squared and negative 2x. They have a 2x in common, and it would take an x to get me the top term, and it would take a negative 1 to get the bottom term. So I'm going to factor out a 2x, leaving an x minus 1 behind. Next, I have negative 3x and positive 3. Well, those are both divisible by a negative 3. The top would need an x and the bottom would need a negative 1 to get them back to the original problems. So I'm going to factor out a negative 3, which leaves behind an x minus 1. I can see that that x minus 1 is the binomial in common for the first half and the second half. So I'm factoring out an x minus 1 and leaving behind a 2x minus 3. So there's my factorization. Take a look at the next problem. X squared minus 7x plus 10. Push pause, take a minute, and try this problem on your own. Then push play when you're ready to compare your work to mine. I did the problem twice. Once if you did the negative 2x minus 5x, and then the second time if you would set it up as negative 5x minus 2x. So your work either should look like what I wrote in green or it should look like what I wrote in mauve. Take a moment, compare your work to mine, push pause if you need to, and then let's go on to the next problem. All right, our next problem is kind of neat. I'm not sure, I can't remember if we've seen one like this before. When you're looking at this one, you should be like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to have a quadratic trinomial, right? We've been focusing on polynomials with 3 terms, where the first term was an x squared, the middle term was just an x, and the last term had just a number. But this doesn't fit that pattern. So think about what's missing. This one is missing the middle term. So here we are using a method called splitting the middle term, and we don't even have one. So this actually adds a first step to what we need to do. Notice we've got the first term, we've got the x squared. We don't have the middle term, but we do have the last term, the minus 25. Well, we need this thing to be a trinomial in order to be able to split the middle term. So we've got to think about this. The middle term has to have an x. But in order for it to not exist in the problem, there must have been 0 of them. So when we're missing the middle term in a problem, we can put it in so that the problem looks normal and we know what to do, as long as what we put in is a 0x. It doesn't change the value, it just makes it look normal. So now we can proceed through the problem the way we usually would. Let's set up our puzzle. We need to multiply to get negative 25 because we've got 1x squared and a negative 25. We can add to get 0 because that's what our missing middle term must have been. Well, we solved this problem up above in the puzzle practice. Negative 5 and positive 5. Multiply to make negative 25 and add to make 0. So let's split that middle term. So I'm going to have x squared minus 5x plus 5x minus 25. And then I'm going to put in my parentheses to turn this into the two binomials. So I'm going to write x squared and negative 5x off on the side so I can identify their greatest common factor as x and the other factor as x and negative 5 respectively. So x is what I factor out, and x minus 5 is what's left inside the parentheses. Then I do the other two terms, 5x minus 25. Well, these each have a 5 in common, which leaves an x and a negative 5 as their other factors. So I'm going to factor out the GCF of a positive 5 and leave behind an x minus 5. When I look at the problem, I see that both of these have an x minus 5. So I can factor out the x minus 5 and leave behind the other factors of x plus 5. That gives me my factorization for x squared minus 25. Let's summarize the steps that we did there so that we kind of have a reference when we see another problem like this in the future. So step 1 was we put in 0x to create the trinomial. Step 2 is we solved the puzzle. Remember, the puzzle always comes from what multiplies to make AC. So what do I mean by AC? Well, normally we have ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the form that we're in for our quadratic trinomial. So what multiplies to make AC and what adds to make b? That's the puzzle that we're solving. Step 3 was to split the middle term according to the two numbers we found in the puzzle. Step 4, we created a sum of two binomials. That's where we go in and we put the parentheses with the plus sign in between to let us group the first two terms and the last two terms. The next thing we did is we factored out a GCF from each binomial, from each binomial. That got us to the step you see at the top of the screen right now, the x times x minus 5 and the 5 times x minus 5. And then our last step, step 6, is to factor out the common binomial. That's where we recognize that they each had an x minus 5, so we factored it out and we wrote the other factor. So those are the 6 steps that goes into one of those funny little binomial problems. All right, there's one last problem for today. I want you to try this one on your own. I'm not going to do it for you here. So this one is kind of like your homework problem. Once you're done solving this problem, make sure to upload your work into the Google Classroom.